I'm honestly wondering how many people will actually get the thumbnail, but all I could think of the whole time was the artist formerly known as the Moon the whole time. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about the artificial structure formerly known as the Moon. And yes, my bad joke to start with. This is by I.K. Stokbaek, and I have no idea if I'm saying that correctly, but this was actually a review copy that was sent to me a while back, and is one that it was kind of shorter in sci-fi, and so I'm like, I can definitely get this in at some point. And it's been a bit. I've been really backed up on review copies, but I did get to this one, and this was an interesting one for sure. So this presents as if it's going to be doing kind of the stereotypical dystopian sci-fi type of thing. We have a character, Darlin, who is just like really upset with his life, wants to join up with the Order of Demolition, which are kind of like the anarchist people that are trying to overthrow everything. And then you have your other character, Marianne, who's also one of they're called indigents, or the people who just kind of live in these outskirts, barely surviving, and she's very much a believer in the system. And then we have a character, Sabine, who is one of the lobbyists, and is the daughter and niece of some really important people, a part of the two. So we're kind of looking at the two sides, the elite and the poor who are out there. And so at first I'm like, oh, are we just going to kind of do this? But this actually goes into some really different directions, which I think is interesting, and what it explores within a pretty short page count overall. I think this was around 200 pages. I think it does a good job with. This is very much, and I find this interesting because I was just talking about when I did a review of The Passengers by John Mars. It was interesting seeing like more of a positive spin and look ahead at AI. This is very much more, you could tell, modern, where the look at AI is very negative overall and the way it's looking. And so instead of really focusing on the haves, the have-nots, that type of thing, we're really looking at AI a lot in this, and the way that that's impacted both the people who have nothing and the people who seem to have everything. And so instead of it being an us versus them thing, it's taking a more human approach to both sides in some interesting ways. And I thought it was interesting the way that that's done. This does do some of the things where, like, there's the setup and people have certain expectations and things aren't quite the way they are. So it does still do some of the things you'd expect in sort of dystopian sci-fi, that type of thing. But instead of just taking that full, stereotypical tropey approach, it explores things a little bit of a different way. I do think, as I was reading through this is the kind of book that I was thinking that in some ways it could have benefited from being a little bit longer, because you could have explored some of the things, had a little bit more build up before having some of the reveals. But other ways, I think this is actually, having this be shorter is smart, because sometimes with some of these explorations, some of these ideas, you can only explore it for so long as well. So this fits, I think, into the middle, where there were some things I'm like, I feel like I'm used to people spending a little bit more time with it, but I think it works just spending a little bit more of a limited time with some of the things, because even the things that are revealed aren't necessarily shocking, because you like I said, you expect it to an extent. But like I said, I think this the big thing that sets this apart for me is the author has a more a very specific and a bit more unique voice on this type of thing, even though that it's a story that we've definitely seen. So talking a little bit more about it, it's the artificial structure formerly known as the Moon, which is something that you have repeated quite a bit throughout. And the Moon's playing into this, but really we still have that base setup where you have the indigents. They live in these like small little towns, and there's a machine called a necessary that disperses like nutrition cubes and water and any sort of necessities for them, and they're completely dependent on that machine to live. And that's the indigents. On the other side, you have the lobbyists who live in lobbies, which are these highly controlled environments where still they have different forms of necessaries that do pretty much everything for them, except they're obviously living in quite a lot more luxury than you are. So some themes we're looking at here are the idea of just relying on AI and not really having people doing anything, that sort of thing, which we've talked about, in people in general, society has talked about, you're always afraid that, the next thing is going to be, oh, it's this new mechanical thing or this new robot or AI or whatever you end up calling it's going to take over. So it's kind of exploring some of those themes, but, looking at the far future kind of speculative fiction type of look at what this could look like. And not only slightly different look between the classes, like I mentioned as well, but it gets into some kind of weird stuff that I'm a little bit mixed with how it landed with me. But as far as like looking at the nature of time, the nature of artificial intelligence and how it reacts with the world, that type of thing. So there's a little bit of a deeper spin there. And the story does go in some very unique and interesting directions that I wasn't expecting, that I think work. Although at some points it did seem a little bit muddled and like it just was kind of going, and the explanation is there's no explanation, that kind of thing. So I've read other books. It did give it a very classic sci-fi feel to me for that, because I feel like that's something I've seen in a lot of those, where it's just like you're not really fully explaining why something happened, but you're just like, that lack of explanation is the explanation, and getting into kind of like theories of time and the nature of other things. And there's a lot of discussion on, what artificial intelligence is, how you classify it, what, how is it different from humans, and that sort of thing. So a lot of that kind of philosophical discussion is discussed around the backdrop of the events that are happening here around our cast of characters. And the characters are all pretty different in how they're set up and what they're doing as well. And I think this is one of those books where it's really thematically it's interesting. The discussion on philosophy and time and all that's interesting as well. And so I think this is definitely for the people who like speculative fiction or speculative sci-fi. I think you'll get a good bit out of this, and it's a pretty quick read. It is one that I think too, I've been a little bit of a sci-fi kick lately, just because I did a ton of really big, heavy, epic fantasy, and so doing something that's shorter and very different was kind of nice. So I found this a really interesting and thought-provoking read, and while some parts of it felt a little bit muddled, or I think some things could have been explored a little bit more, I still think this is really solid. And it looks like from the author note at the end too, this is a debut too, so pretty strong effort for the first book with what this is doing. But yeah, I'd be curious to see what else this author is going to end up doing. And I think this was an interesting read for those of you who are looking to try something a little bit different on the sci-fi or speculative fiction type of route. Really, though, those are my thoughts on the artificial structure formerly known as the moon. Let me know if your thoughts on kind of the speculative sci-fi or any of the things AI, that type of thing. I think there's a lot to discuss here based on the topics and the themes of this book here. So let me know your thoughts, opinions on that, as well as if this sounds like something you'd be interested in checking out. Always curious to hear from you. Otherwise, make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description, as always, for the Wizardly Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.